questions. So let me introduce our next speaker panelist, Dr. David Padgett. David is Associate Professor of Geography and Director of the Geographic Information Sciences at Tennessee State University. He has served as the Global Learning and Observations to Benefit the Environment, which acronym of GLOBE, partner and trainer for TSU since 2001. He is a graduate of Western Kentucky University and the University of Florida. Since 1992, Dr. Padgett has become the owner and chief consultant of an environmental consulting firm, GEO Mental. He was awarded the American Association of Geographers 2019 Presidential Achievement Award for significant contributions in advancing geography, GIS, and STEM education within the historically Black college and university. The same year, he was named an Ethical GEO Fellow by the American Geographical Society in support of his project, Democratizing Geospatial Technology. Let's welcome David Padgett.
Good morning. So I established the Geographic Information Sciences Lab at Tennessee State University over 20 years ago. And TSU, Tennessee State University, is an historically Black college and university. And all HBCUs were built on a tradition of service from the very beginning. At Tennessee State University, our motto is think, work, serve. Our charge is enter to learn, leave to serve. So I knew that when I built the Geographic Information Sciences Lab, that we were going to be providing service to communities, specifically environmental justice communities. Again, I'm an Ethical Geo Fellow, and my project, Democratizing Geospatial Technology, specifically put me in the place of providing these services to environmental justice communities all over the country. The first thing is to go into communities, and at this point, I had to make a decision. In some cases, we have to make a decision as to whether we're going to be scholar activists or activist scholars. Are we going to be scholar activists or activist scholars? And really, we need both. You know, we do need people to do research and publish in academic journals and do those things. But an activist scholar actually goes to communities, actually works on the ground, as you can see in this photograph. But we need both people on both sides of the coin when it comes to developing and creating map products. So this is me in a community working with people who might be cafeteria workers, truck drivers, children, helping them to build maps of their communities so that they can fight against environmental injustice, so that they can empower themselves and be engaged as agents in map development, not as subjects. How many of you all in here have ever used a rapidograph pen? Wow, not a whole lot of hands going up. Yeah, so you all remember those days. We didn't have technology. When we made a map back then, we started off with no tech. You had a sheet of paper, a table, and your rapidograph pen that you prayed to the pen gods did not leak all over your map. It's usually when you're almost done. A lot of people are looking at me like, what are you talking about? Well, it's back in the day. So back then, not everybody could make a map. You know, so that was, but the good news today is anybody can make a map. We have all this free technology available to everyone, from Google Maps to ArcGIS Online. Anybody can make a map. That's the good news. The bad news is that anybody can make a map, right? Anybody, and we've seen some bad maps, but what is missing is cartography. That's what's missing. That's what we were taking. That's the class we took with those rapidograph pens, cartography. That's missing now. Anybody can just get online. No, none of the science behind cartography, no discussion about color ramps, no discussion about any of that. Pop a map up, you've seen them, they're bad. So when we start off with community-based mapping, we don't take any technology out there. We just walk through the community. When was the last time we walked through our community? Most of us drive through at 35, 40 miles per hour, and there's so much that we miss. And we're talking in terms of environmental justice communities, and we walk through what's there. And I've done a lot of pathology mapping. Where are all the dumps? Where's all the crime? Where are all the bad things in our communities? But when we start to engage with people in their communities, they say, well, wait a minute. You know, our communities aren't these geographies of pathology. There are a lot of good things. And so we want to replicate those good things through what we call community asset mapping. That begins with us just walking through, pointing out things. Then later on, we get into all the technology, GPS, GIS, so on and so forth. And with this technology and with this power, communities can enable themselves to make change, to fight against environmental injustice. I'm going to go through a few case studies. This was a community, Wedgwood community in Pensacola, Florida, a black community that in this case, there was a 4-lane highway that was planned to be built through this community. The local activists, after going through the training, created maps themselves, went forward to their county commission, using the maps showed that that highway wouldn't just impact the black community, but would impact everybody. Highway was immediately shut down. Now let me make a note. I wasn't there. You know, my job is to work myself out of a job. I can't wear a cape and fly into communities anytime they need me. You know, there's just one David Padgett. There's lots of communities. They should be able to empower themselves to become cartographers, solve their own problems like this community did, stop this highway using maps, and also $13 million that was slated for the highway was used for community improvement projects for infrastructure in the Wedgwood neighborhood, and they weren't done. Later on, there was a landfill permit. Now, this community already has 13 landfills in a residential community. Believe it or not, someone tried to put a 14th permit for a landfill in this community. The gentleman you see here, he's a pastor, you know, Pastor Greer. He's not a cartographer, he's not an engineer, but yet he and other members of the Unity in the Family Ministry went before the county commission and used a series of maps, used cartography, blocked this landfill permit from going through. Again, I wasn't there. I wasn't anywhere near Wedgwood, Florida when they did this. This is called community empowerment with maps. Here's a map of the historically black Turkey Creek community in Mississippi. I went to this community, trained them at Gulfport High School in how to use maps. They're using the EJ screen map to fight against an inland port facility that's being planned for their community. Their community is zoned industrial. What the state of Mississippi and other antagonists are trying to do is gloss over the fact that there are human beings within this industrial zoned area. You might ask, well, how can a community that's clearly residential be zoned industrial? These are black people and they're in Mississippi. End of story. So we see what's happened in Jackson, Mississippi recently. You know, we had a large city, largely African-American, without water for months. This is Mississippi. These are African-Americans. This is what happens. But fortunately, this case is going all the way to the state Supreme Court of Mississippi, and we're using these maps as evidence in that case. So we're moving forward. I don't have nearly enough time to talk about this, but this is the story of Africatown in Mobile, Alabama. It was a front page story, I believe, in the February 2020 National Geographic magazine. You might have read about it. There's a movie on Netflix now called Descendant about this story of the last slave ship. But I've been working in Mobile, Alabama, in the Africatown community for about 7 years. We started out with asset mapping. After this community showed up on 60 Minutes, front page of National Geographic, now there's a movie. There are going to be people wanting to visit this town. But as of right now, there's nothing there, really. The artifacts are there, the history is there, the people are there, the descendants are there, but there's no infrastructure for heritage tourism, or what we might call cultural tourism. Some of you might have gone to a place called Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia, right? Some of us have been there. It was a high school field trip, right? You learn about the colonial history of colonial USA. That place was second only to Disney World in terms of visitation by tourists. Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia, we know the mouse gets everybody, but after the mouse was Colonial Williamsburg. So this cultural heritage tourism has amazing potential. And so I'm working with this community, building story maps. My students actually had this as a class project. My students built this story map in 3 weeks. My students had never even heard of GIS, and they were virtual, and they managed to build this map because the National Park Service, which is helping to develop a certain portion of this called the Africa Town Connections Blueway, the National Park Service didn't have GIS. At least the cultural division of the National Park Service did not have GIS or does not have GIS. My students stepped in. I said, you got 3 weeks to build this map as a service to this community, and my HBCU students did that. And I said, you can take this with you in your digital resume, and if somebody asks you, have you done GIS? In an interview, you can pop up the link to this map and say, yes, I have. And not only did I do GIS, not just for me, but I'm helping this community develop its heritage tourism. We also have done some drone work in the community, and so a second set of students developed this story map of drone coverages. So this, in the drone imagery has to be conducted in order for the landscape architects to develop the sites. I mean, this is a completely undeveloped historical resource right now. The Heritage House is going to open up in Africa Town, I believe, next January. Again, the movie The Descendants is on Netflix right now. In Houston, Texas, this is an area that is the largest petrochemical site it's the second largest in the world, largest in the country. No zoning in Houston. People living literally next door to refineries and all kinds of things that you would not want to live next door to because there's no zoning in Houston. And so people are very concerned about their air quality. So I've been working with doing community-based mapping, asset mapping, training them how to use EJ Screen, how to place air monitors in the right areas. This is very interesting. Overtown in Miami, Florida, it's being encroached upon by developers, largely as a result of sea level rise. Developers are moving inland, taking over this historically Black community. I went there, Overtown, we did an asset map in order to preserve their history. I went back to Overtown. I was visiting Overtown. I noticed this placard on the ground that had a QR code. I read the box for the placard. I said, wait a minute, I wrote that. After I built the story map, this community moved forward and created a virtual tour using QR codes. This is exactly what I'm talking about. We start off with a simple story map. These people empowered themselves to create a virtual map, which eventually will have voiceovers from elders. Elders saw the original story map and said, that's not all of Black history in Overtown. And so that now we'll have people who actually live the history. When you scan the QR code, you can hear their voices talk about places like the Clyde Killens Pool Hall and Recreation Center when they were there, when it was viable. More air monitoring in Houston, Texas, and helping them to install purple air sensors in collaboration with NASA. And eventually they'll have their own dashboard of all of these community-based sensors in Houston. And so not the regulatory monitors, but the community-based sensors will all be on one platform. I've been working with them for 2 years on that project. We now have Dr. Archer, you saw yesterday. We have an HBCU environmental justice technical team, and we are going to be providing the same kind of map services with HBCU professional mapping experts to environmental justice communities all over the country. Well, we're doing it right now. We have created a supplementary climate and environmental justice screening tool. The original CJIS tool did not include race. We have reprogrammed it. We have raced in that tool built on an Esri platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David.